Hey, all, welcome to episode 86 of the Zach Thinks Your podcast. Real quick, before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to remind you that if you want the guests to keep getting better, if you want the production to get better, if you want to see and hear more of these conversations, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or if you're on Spotify. I won't ask more of you. If you want to do bonus because you're loving these, please drop a review. But for now, I would love if you could hit the subscribe button. That really helps me grow the podcast. I'd love to have a sponsor and be able to do more of this specific work full time. But right now, this is just sort of a fun hobby for me. I don't really get paid for it, but I'm able to have awesome conversations with cool people that I'm hoping will bring you value. So if you want that to improve, help me out. Other than that, I look forward to jumping on him. Dr. Tracy D, really wonderful conversation. So glad she got to join with us. Hello and welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. Today I get to have with me Dr. Tracy Delglish. It is Tracy, I've gotten to read your book. I've been watching your content for probably 2 years straight. I think you originally had said hi to me and had me on your podcast, which you were like the first, it felt like, big podcast I was on. And I felt like I had made it. But I've been really inspired by a lot of the work that you talk about around invisible labor. And I think when I read your book and got to talk about it with people, I think the most important or inspiring thing that I gathered from it was your personal story underneath it. I forget sometimes as a coach for men that me bringing my personal brand, my personal life into it is, maybe it's to my detriment, but sometimes it feels like an advantage that a lot of therapists don't have, is I feel like they're not supposed to bring themselves into it. But I found it super refreshing getting to hear so much of what you dealt with while you're becoming a therapist, in so much of your schooling, and you sharing the challenges with it. So I want to start with maybe kind of introduce yourself, but what was some of the inspiration behind sharing so much more about your story and not just the advice that you give to many of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, Zach, let me just start by saying thank you for having me here in your community. I brought you onto my podcast because I loved how you were talking about the mental load and giving this different perspective that really has become a voice for men to understand so much of what women experience in heterosexual relationships. And that was the impetus to invite you into my space. And since then, I've greatly appreciated seeing the work you're doing, how you're growing. And also, I'm so grateful for the support that you've given my work. So thank you for that. And for listeners, I'm Dr. Tracy. I'm a psychologist and couples therapist. Those are my main roles. The side roles is I'm a content creator. I make accessible what I do in my therapy room to people all over the world. And it really started after the birth of my second child, where I was dissatisfied with how people were talking about creating healthy relationships in the depths of our Canadian winter while I was on maternity leave with my second. So I started this Instagram space at Dr. Tracy D. I started my online resources so people can learn the same skills and tools I teach here in my therapy room. And the other behind the scenes pieces that people don't see is I own my mental health clinic here with my husband, who's also part of my business with me. So we know what it means to have to be really good communicators. And of course, I'm a mom and a wife. So gosh, the piece around bringing myself into my story, when I thought about, so my book is called I Didn't Sign Up for This. And I found myself throughout my career sitting in front of women, couples, and repeating the same thing over and over again. This isn't the relationship I signed up for. I didn't sign up for this. Whether we were talking about the mental load, the communication patterns that we know so many couples get stuck in, whether we're talking about dealing with in-laws, sex, how we're parenting, just all of these issues, these everyday challenges that people have. And what's so interesting is that throughout my own journey of becoming a mother, I found myself crying in the shower saying the very same things. I didn't sign up for this. And yet the challenge of this, Zach, is that I would go to the park with my kids, and the moms or the parents around me would be talking about nap schedules and feeding and what solids they introduced or what play groups they're going to. And inside of me, I'm thinking, Is anybody else hating their husband as much as I do? Does anyone else have this bucket load of resentment that they're experiencing? And so this is really what led me to write a story, not just about the couples that I've helped create healthy, interdependent relationships throughout all of their seasons, but also how I had to do the work in my own relationship. And a lot of people, I remember starting my Instagram space, and I was one of the earlier therapists on Instagram doing this work. And Zach, truthfully, I didn't tell my colleagues here in Ottawa, I didn't tell anybody I was doing this because
Hmm.
I felt like I was opening a door that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And that was sitting in this experience of saying, you know what? My husband and I, we know what it means to get critical and defensive of each other. We know what it means to have resentment. We know what it means to feel like two ships passing in the night. And so when it came to putting stories into this book, I knew that people needed to also know that myself as an expert struggled as well. And the reality is, I've been a human a lot longer than I've been a therapist. And I'm
Hmm.
not immune to struggling in our partnership.
Yeah, and I think the my recovering man child brand, if you will, I feel like that's what I aim to do is call out myself. I was sharing with a couple of content creators at Mom 2.0 that I think my best videos for the men that especially need to lean in and like find these language and be able to be a part of this conversation. They need to hear that I'm still screwing up every day parts of my marriage for them to be able to lean in and that I'm not perfect and
Right.
I might be a fifth grader and they're the fourth grader, and that we're along the way. I'm not going to talk to you as if I'm a college professor that has everything working out.
I think that really speaks to where we are in society right now. That I, even from the first day of my training in my PhD, the first day we all had our professor say to us, swipe any social media story of you. Excuse me. Make sure your clients cannot find you. That was the message in 2006 that we received. And yet today, what I'm experiencing with my clients, and I'll tell you a specific story around this, is that we crave to know that others are human. So when we think of the trajectory of psychotherapy, we think of first Freud sitting in his chair with the couch, and the patient has their head at the couch, and so they're not even looking at each other. And the idea was to be this blank slate so that whatever comes to mind comes out and you can start making your own revelations and connections to things. But the real change we know in psychotherapy research is that, and this is the biggest predictor of whether you'll make change in psychotherapy is whether you feel connected to the person you're working with. Do you have a therapeutic alliance, which really speaks to our common humanity? So, the piece that I'll always remember with this client is a mom came into my therapy room. We were probably on session 3 or 4, and I just kept experiencing this wall with her. Anytime something hard would come up, I'd reflect it back. She would just touch it slightly, and then she'd say, "It's fine, we're just going through it. We'll be okay." Wall, puts up a wall in front of me. And then she comes in for maybe the fourth or the fifth session and she says, "Well, I know you told me not to follow you on Instagram because of our relationship as therapist client, and I know all the privacy things." And she said, "But I saw what you posted on the weekend." And it was a post about struggling in parenthood. I think I had at the time a 1 and a 3-year old, and I was overwhelmed, overstimulated. I lost my cool. I yelled. I felt shame. Just wasn't a good parenting moment. And she said, "I see that you're not perfect now. I see that you struggle in this too. Like that could have just been me on the weekend." And immediately her wall went down. And we started then doing the work in therapy.
I'd like to think that most of the guys are able to work with me because they hear me share so many of those moments.
Yeah, you get it. You're in that being able to say like, "You know what, man, totally. I get defensive or I do this thing on autopilot and yeah, I get it. And now here's what I've done differently. Maybe you could try it."
What was the when you were writing your book? I didn't sign up for this. What was the scariest part of the story of telling yourself that you were really afraid, maybe to put on the page, or you're like, no, I know I don't want to share this, but I know that it's going to make a huge difference for people.
I know exactly the chapter. It's the chapter where Greg and I are sitting on the couch in our living room, and it's around setting a boundary and protecting our marriage. We were in a hard spot. We were adjusting to parenthood, adjusting to all kinds of things. And it wasn't my best moment. It was messy. And I had ended up leaving the conversation. I left the house. And I think I had said something, I can't remember what it was in the book. I had said something along the lines of, who do you go to bed with every day? Choose me. And, or maybe I had text that, I can't even remember now, but maybe I had text that and deleted it and I didn't send it. But in the book, the memories that's vivid that I had written in there is how I put on my shoes, I started going for a walk, and then I ended up on a bench in a full-blown panic attack. And it was this moment in our marriage where we were so distant. We looked like the happy couple at the park. We would all go together with our little white dog and our son, and we just looked like we were okay. And that's what people do. And yet inside, and Zach, the piece why this carries this element of shame for myself is because I know the skills and tools. I know the front of my brain knows exactly how to move out of that. And the back of my brain could not do it. And again, it goes back to that humanness around it. So it was really powerful then to receive so much feedback. And truthfully, I thought it would be mostly from women, but I received a lot of messages from men. That's the piece that surprised me, is just how many men needed to read these stories because they saw themselves being reflected back and they felt validated. They felt seen so that they could see like, oh, I get defensive, not because my wife is saying, why don't you put the dishes away? It's because I feel this deep sense of inadequacy. And look, Matt in the book feels that too.
Yeah. As I'm thinking about like validation and like what has really helped me along the way, I think fair play, a huge part of it was like creating vocabulary for me to much better access, like understanding what the hell Alyssa was talking about when she felt like alone in our house and like carrying all the invisible labor, especially in our first year of parenting. I think vocabulary, like I was talking with you earlier about weaponizing competence and how I feel like it's overused. And I think it's shaping the way that we're looking at some of the things showing up in our household in a way that is not a useful context. One of the words that I learned from your book was interdependence. And I think it helped me access that there are a lot of moments where I felt like Alyssa needed to be on exactly the same page about a lot of things. And it helped me realize that we're still different humans. Odd to say this, like that was okay, that I felt like there was a problem with like us not being on completely same paths or something. That occurred to me as like a huge point that you were trying to drive was interdependence. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have around either interdependence or like their understanding of how they should, the structure of how they should be with their partner?
Absolutely. I think even what you're saying right there is somehow in a healthy relationship, we are the same. We view the world the same. We want to parent the same way. We want to approach labor tasks in the home or even emotional tasks the same. And often what I remind people is that the reason we go to sameness tends to be because it creates a sense of safety. It's a false sense of safety because it's not really emotional safety, but it's familiarity. Our brains love familiarity. And what ends up happening then when we seek this sameness, so a lot of this is around parenting or around mental load type things. When we seek that, we lose the nuance in what it means to be two different people. And then what tends to happen is, so there's two things that can happen in a relationship. We start to become codependent, or the other word I like to use, because I don't attach to a lot of these pop psych terms that are overused, emotionally fused. So if I'm upset about this that's happening, you should be just as upset about it. And for people who are listening, I put my hands together, one hand is on top of the other, and we're emotionally fused. We can't even see that there are two separate hands. They're just lumped together. That's what codependency sounds like. It's like if I come home in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood. If I say, I want pizza, but you really want tacos, and you're like, yeah, pizza sounds great, we lose the self. And what's been happening, Zach, in a lot of the discourse through social media, through the rapid spread of information, is now people go into this hyper independence. We are so focused on not losing ourselves, in the way that sounds like, well, that's your feeling, so that's not my problem. Well, you're having a hard time. You need to go deal with it. You go to a therapist. You go and do that. That's independence. to an extreme. And our goal instead is to balance, which is incredibly hard to do, is to balance this idea of being autonomous. So having our own autonomy, our own thoughts, our own desires and wishes and values, and then seeing how we can build this connection, this intimacy. And the way I like to do it with my hands is I put my hands as two circles with my index finger and my thumb, and I put them together, linked like a chain. Because we don't lose ourselves, we bring together our separate selves, and then we build that connection to co-create. And that one statement I say in the book is, I am me and you are you, and we are both okay. So when you go to do bedtime and you choose to read 3 books and then do 3 songs and then put our little one down to bed, and I say, I'm doing 1 book, 1 song down to bed, there's nothing wrong with that. We're both emotionally attuned to our child. It just looks a little different. The outcome's still the same. Child is connected, safe, going to bed. Or if it looks like how we're going to approach a task in the household, it will look different. But circling back to what you had said, we need the language. We need to be able to express our desires, to be curious with each other, and then to do that co-creation piece. How do we do it together? Because so much of what people get stuck in is around this who's right and who's wrong. And that is completely focused on building hyper independence.
Yeah, so Alyssa and I took a training course recently so that we could both get certified in the connection codes methodology, which the basics of them is just understanding 8 core emotions: anger, sad, lonely, hurt, fear, shame, guilt, and joy, and being able to like articulate the hell out of that and be able to like consistently speak that. So like we're sharing emotions left and right over here. Like I feel like we talk a new language over here as of a couple months ago. One of the big challenges that we have is when both of us end up flooded for something happening. The worst that we've had in the past couple months was I was not doing a great job managing time. Our toddler got kind of overstimulated and like past her like breaking point, if you will. And I think Alyssa felt super hurt that I wasn't paying close enough attention, but I said that like I'm defaulting right now, I got this. And we ended up, when she hits that like state where we've hit probably a handful in the last year, is like she can't reason at all. She won't go to bed. Like we almost have to go to like forcefully bring her to like picking her up and bring her to another room, like letting her cool down, and like we're doing the best we can. I feel like I'm telling on myself. A lot of shame popping up for me right now.
Your toddler is flooded, right? That is the experience of being flooded. Their brains cannot come back down. The emotion is high.
So we got to that point, and Alyssa was able to, there's a moment where I'm just like quiet in the background. She's saying, I'm feeling really hurt. I'm feeling really angry that we're here right now because of how you manage the time. She kind of takes over. The end of it, we finally get her down. Mostly Alyssa finally gets her down. Then we came back to the kitchen. I was proud of us in the moment. So what we have been doing is throwing down the emotion wheel, which has the 8 emotions, which is like, it's an exercise to give us both some safe space to talk. Because I think what has historically happened is it turns into probably Alyssa sharing what's going on for her. I don't feel like I have any space to be heard either. And so I just end up in defense and like I'm flooded and it's really hard for me to hear anything she has to say. And so she keeps, turning like into her head banging against the wall, like not literally, but like her saying and being like, are you hearing what I'm saying? And I'm like I just can't, I'm having such a hard time acknowledging anything. So I think I was thinking of it almost like, you ever seen those those wood chopping competitions where they chop a piece and then they like jump into the little wedge and then they climb up another part of the tree and then they make another wedge? It felt kind of like that as we're making a small wedge. So I went first. So I had just enough safe space. I could feel just enough heard that after I felt heard, then she had a lot more probably emotions than I did so that she could feel heard. And the conversation definitely went longer than we wanted it to. But I think the hardest part for us is when we're both flooded, figuring out like who's the one being listened to more, like who needs a little bit more of the safe space, or we're still kind of navigating like how do we, one, do it for ourselves, and 2, how do we kind of teach it for people. I think one of the things we've been trying to do, or at least I've been trying to do, and she really doesn't like, is like, can we take a breather for 15 minutes and then come back to this? I think she has a really hard time like hearing that, and or part of it's probably distrust from the past where it hasn't turned always into that 15 minutes. But
Yeah,
what kind
I
of
think
tools do you
that
give for people in that double flooded state?
yeah, and also the whole idea of who gets to go first, right? And the trust in partners really comes from knowing that you'll each get a turn. So it doesn't really matter who goes first, but there's the trust and safety that we each will have space to be heard and understood. So I think it's great that you guys are doing that intentional coming together. But the key here, and this is the hard part because it does take the partner who is really needing, like has more of that pressing need to talk about this now. It does take a lot for us to say, and I say me intentionally because that's my position, is that I have to then do we're going to come back to it. Look, he's just said we'll come back to it. And you all on your side, you have to hold your word. I'll come back to it. And I saw this piece from Terrence Real. Terrence Real wrote the book Us. It's a fantastic book. He does a lot of work with couples. And he said, no, no, no. You don't take a day. You don't take 2 days to come back to something. That's ridiculous. You come back within an hour, within max 2 hours, but you have to come back at that time. And I think for a lot of people who get to this place of, I have to go, we have to talk about it now, that does come from this place of mistrust that we haven't done this before. So how you then step into that is being able to say, I'm setting a timer on my phone. The timer is for 30 minutes. I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to come back and have this conversation. But I need you to know, and the validation here is so important. So Zach, in your position, the person who gets so flooded and needs the time, you have to see your partner first. You have to be able to say, you are important to me. Getting through this is so important to me. I will be back. Timers on my phone. I'm going to go and sit and play video games. I'm not going to scroll on my phone and numb out. I'm not going to go and call the friend who will be like, oh, Zach, you're so right.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. I'm going to go and regulate myself. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go have a cold shower. I'm going to go do some exercise, and then I'll come back and I'll be able to do this. Here's my experience. Here's your experience. And the other piece in this is when we come back, and I'll come back to the experience of flooding for a second. But when we come back, we need to be inside ourselves. We don't come back doing you did this and now I'm sad and you did that, and right? We need to go inside. Why was this so hard for me? What did this remind me of from my past? Why did this feel like such a hot button? And how am I feeling it here in this relationship with you? And what is it that I need? So the flooding piece, I think this is really important. I posted this recently, and this is a common thing that shows up for a lot of women, particularly because we know that most women tend to be the one reaching for connection. They tend to be more in that position of pursuing. I don't love these words, but the more critical, blaming pursuer in the dynamic when we think of pursuing, defending, withdrawing. And so for a lot of men, they'll say, when I get flooded, it feels like static in my brain. It feels like, the old TVs when you lost connection with the antenna. That's what it's like in my brain. I can't think. I don't know what I feel. I'm just saying anything. I'm just trying to get out of this. I'm just trying to make it stop. I don't know what to do. I can't make sense of any of this. And it is this like brain, nervous system overwhelm experience that I don't know what to do. Now, the piece I hear from a lot of women is they say, I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of having to be the one to go to you and wait for you to not be flooded. And why do I have to be the one? And so I think then when I look at the dynamic, we want to be able to do this together. So how can Alyssa help you come out of that flooding position? Not so that she loses her boundaries and so she doesn't get any space and it's all about you and placating you and pleasing you. No, that's not it. How do we co-regulate together without me losing my boundaries? And then you making space to also hear what's happening for me. And sometimes it's like self-regulation, you go and do it on your own. Other times it's co-regulation, we can do it together.
That was a lot there.
Sorry,
When I hear no, that there's I have to go re-listen to that to like re-get that for myself. As you were talking about like pursuing, I feel like that's so much of the emotional labor that we often talk about. Mm-hmm. And I know that It's interesting is that the past couple of years that Alyssa and I have been working on the Fair Play method implementation and really hacking away at like bringing equality, maybe not equality, equity in our home. I think it started off with my understanding was like, I have about 99% of the work to do and she has about 1% of the work to do. And then she read Fair Play and saw where, we brought up a conversation of how I had talked one day. I was like, I feel like you take a long time to do the laundry. What if I just do laundry? And it like kind of came flying out of her mouth. I was like, I feel like I'm a failure as a mom if I'm doing the laundry. I was like, wow, wow, I'm proud of you for like letting that come out of your mouth, because it was like that was probably a barrier that we had no idea was holding us back.
Yeah, totally.
And I think both of us have started feeling, okay, maybe it's more like a 70% work, I got to do 30%. And I'm curious, when for a lot of the couples that you work with, for a lot of the relationships, it occurs to me that a lot of guys are much more poorly resourced at a young age to talk about their emotions. And I feel like the ability to talk about our emotions is a huge barrier for like accomplishing anything in therapy, in relationship counseling. Would you say that that is one of the biggest barriers that a lot of guys have for making change in that sort of setting, and or like just improving on the relationship?
In the sense of talking about emotions?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about development recently around boys and girls. And we know from the research that girls develop emotionally and socially faster than boys do. And it's really interesting, even when I look at my own children, my daughter has had these early social experiences of like friend breakups in grade one, where my son didn't have that at that time. And even just watching the emotions of girls versus boys, you can see, and this is shown in the research, that girls are more in tune to the social connection and boys are not. And so then when we think about how are we raising our boys, we want to teach them about awareness of others around them and awareness of what their emotions are and how they can express them. And I use that word co-create again. It's something that I use in my family. We talk about participating in the family. Everybody has their role. What are they doing to participate, not to help? And how we co-create. We even talk about co-creating space. The living room space is not a space where we leave all our toys and books out, because that's a space for all of us to be in. And so can you then notice and be aware of what you've left around? And then the piece around sharing emotions and making space for that, we're also doing that at an earlier age. We need to be. And even, at times kind of not pushing is the wrong word, not pushing, but being able to intentionally label. So if your 8-year-old son says, I'm fine, it's no big deal, do you as the parent say, okay, well, I guess it's fine, it's no big deal? Or do you say, hey, one of our values in our family is about sharing emotions. We talk about good things, we talk about hard things. And so when you're ready, we can talk about this and what the feeling is that's showing up there and helping them to label it. So it feels sometimes like a little bit of a heavier lift with some kids. But in general, what we know from the research, from attachment research even, is that in a sample of men and women, men tend to be more avoidant than women. And we can look at their upbringings and see that a lot of men are taught to push their emotions down. And that does become a barrier in their relationship, because then they're not coming forward to share the parts that they're struggling with. And what I tend to see in therapy is that women are concerned around connection and importance. It sounds like, do I matter to you? Can you see me? Can you consider me? And for men, it tends to be around, and again, I'm saying tends to, it's not for everybody, but for a lot of men, what's underneath their frustration and anger and their defensiveness is the real doubt that they're adequate. They feel inadequate, they feel unworthy, they don't feel enough. And part of breaking through that is even being able to go to your partner with a feeling from the day, which would be like, today I had a meeting with this guy and man, I really questioned my ability to do this job in that moment. That right there is a sharing. And the piece, Zach, where it becomes the dynamic is if my husband comes to me and says that, I have to shift out of my own world of what's often happening in my world. Okay, did we sign that permission slip to do the thing at the school? And did we pack the rain boots because it's going to be raining today? And did I get the next size of spring jackets because, we've got snow one day and 20 degrees the next? And right, I have to step out of my load in my brain and go, he's sharing. And I then have to attune to that because that's his bid. Or the story I've told it on other podcasts is the story of my husband sitting across from me one morning at breakfast time, and I was just in the peak of I can't even remember what book it was, but it was a good book. And he sits down. The kids had left the table already, and he looks at the patio door. And he's like, "Oh, the grass is growing really well this year." And I'm thinking, grass? We're going to talk about grass? I'm reading my book, but this is a bid. It's a bid for connection. So I put my book down and I say, yeah, what makes you say that? Tell me more about that. And we ended up having this great conversation around summer plans, around how we were feeling things were going so far and what our desires and wishes were. But it's that ability to attune to each other that really matters.
It's really, I mean, that's super subtle. When you're saying bid, like a bid for connection, and it reminds me of one of the things I've learned recently is how dysregulated I often get around joy. And I didn't realize that I was dysregulated around joy. And it happened. I have a small group of content creators I work with. And I did a webinar with the Fair Play facilitators, just showing them how I go about content creation. And I was so ecstatic. And I had to jump immediately over to a fair play training of couples. And I like couldn't think straight, and I was like, I need to share how excited I am right here, because like I got like a lot of good feedback saying like, oh my god, I haven't felt empowered about social media in years until now. And so I had to say to my group, hey, I've been on back-to-back calls, I got to run to the bathroom. As I went to the bathroom, I said, Alyssa, I just got to share some joy with you. That thing that I've been working on the past 3 months to get that webinar scheduled and to get all the Fair Play facilitators there, I'm so excited about it. Okay, bye. And like just being able to share that was, I didn't realize how much I needed that historically until recently, talking about like regulating joy. And it sounds like it sounds a little bit of what he was doing there was he was regulating some joy around how the grass was growing and all of like the future plans that were unfolding in his head as he was reflecting on that, it sounds like. One of my favorite questions to ask before the end of these shows is, of the many DMs you probably get, I probably get maybe a dozen a day. I know for me, my favorite DM to receive is from another guy saying, hey man, thank you so much for this free content that you put out there. It's really been helping me and my wife improve the conversations that we're having around invisible labor, and she doesn't feel like she's banging her head against the wall trying to talk about mental load. What is one of your favorite DMs that you receive? If you could receive one of those a day for the rest of time, what would they be?
One of my and to contextualize DMs, I believe that we're on social to be social. So I love when people tell me their wins or how something lands, and I'm in there in my DMs on Instagram. So I just love those moments. The one that really resonates for me is, I saw this video, I tried something different, and it came out in this way. Or this video was like an aha moment for me, and I can totally see how that impacts my relationship, and now I have a tool moving forward. And that really comes back to my values of why I'm on social media, is because I understand that the work I do here is not accessible to everybody in my therapy room. And that's how you can't see every couple. And then being able to reach more people and to facilitate different kinds of relationships is just so meaningful. And we're both parents. We can appreciate this, is that when you and your partner, actually, I'll scratch that part. It's not even about parenting, but part of it is. But when you and your partner are connected, when you feel close, when you feel bonded, you can tackle the stresses of everyday life. You become more resilient. You feel more solid in your parenting. Your nervous system is regulated. And that's the power of doing the work in your relationship. It's not just about some checklist or It's just this idea or this experience of being connected with your partner.
Dr. Tracy, I could probably talk to you another 2 hours and not run out of things to talk about. Thank you so much for being with me today and sharing this. I feel like I got a lot out of this, and I'm really glad I had you. You have your book coming out in fall this year, so I'm sure we'll be touching base and sharing more about that when it comes. Real quick, what's it about? What's the inspiration behind it that people can expect coming?
Yeah, so to check out my first book, it's drtracyd.com/book. My second book will be out this fall. I think I spotted it on your bookshelf. I think it's the other side. My second book is titled You, Your Husband, and His Mother. And it is about building a strong relationship bond. There it is. That's the first one. My second book is about dealing with your mother-in-law, because we know for so many daughters-in-law, they struggle with feeling like they're the bad one, like a victim, like a villain, or like a victim in their relationship. And this is really about building a healthy couple relationship to build family relationships that are going to be better for all of you. Because again, we want that solid bond. So that will be out in the fall, and you and I can touch more. I can't wait to send you one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Dr. Tracy, for coming here. I'll have links to socials and or websites in the show notes, and look forward to having you again in the near future.
Thank you, Zach.